Hey, hello guys. Test. How are you guys doing? I'm good. I'm alright. So, in this chapter, we are talking about the favorite thing that I love, which is about logging and logging and logging. So, whatever I love, I would really love to explain in documentation or in diagrams instead of just the code itself. And yeah, let's get into it. So first, Mm, why would you use logging instead of the normal way of logging? So we have here a code here where I have changed a bit. I just added try catch. So this try catch, what it tries to solve is when there is a problem with get users. So we try to catch it, and let's say, for example, we say console.log, and we log this error by mentioning this. So we tend to do that usually. And when we try to run it, I think, yeah, like npm on start, uh, well, it won't work because there won't be any error. But what happens is, usually you could think of console.log would showcase the color of gray, giving a horrible type of way of logging this in the terminal. Like, unlike Nestjs, where we have this logging with this color, this timing, this type of application, what is happening in the event in our Nestjs, console.log is just a nomad way, base way of logging the problems in your terminal without knowing what is happening. So instead of doing that all over the place because it might become inconsistent, so instead of doing console log error here to showcase it, I would prefer possibly, I'll say for example const results and equals to, and then here I'll just return here results, and let's just say here log, and we'll say uh, an event has occurred. Alright, and I'll mention results. Now let's use postman here to test. Oh, I think we don't need to have postman, so we just use here localhost 3000, and we'll use users as the endpoint, and the moment we do that, we see an event has occurred. So if you have noticed, this event has occurred, but in the log it will never mention where it has been, similar to Nestjs. So it doesn't know, it doesn't explain what happened, it doesn't explain which function it occurred, and the color is awful compared to Nestjs. So what we will do is, instead of using the barebone console.log, although it's really nice, but for production purposes, right? If there is an error occurring or anything that occurring, you should know instantly where the file has been, where the information has been caused by, like where the class has come, when the time it was, and all those kind of stuff when you're doing in production, to just diagnose the problem easily and faster. So we will try to log it in a formal, much more elegant way, similar to how Nestjs gives us the information. So what we'll do is we'll remove it here, and we'll go a bit towards the, actually, instead of going towards the diagram first, I will mention what kind of logger we are using. So we're going to use the similar logger as what Nestjs is using, and that is what we call a logger. So here, make a comma and add something called logger. So that's the thing that we are going to use for showing a much more elegant way of with the results. So let's use one of the logger functionality, but first what we have to do is we have to register or initialize our logger for each class. So we will mention private, and we will mention logger, and here I'll say new logger, and that logger specifically will be we will use so in order to give the information where this logging is happening, we'll use user controllers class name. So we'll use that as a name, and I'll show that in a bit what it means. And in here we will do the same thing as we did before. So we'll say this dot logger, and instead of using log, we'll use we'll use log. And here I'll mention an event has occurred. Now look at the difference. So previously it looked like this. Now let's try it out again, and let's try to use the endpoint again. So let's refresh it here, and if you have noticed, it's using the green sign, and it's mentioning in the yellow part that it has been affected in the user controller class because of this thing that we initialized, user controller name. So this one is the string that mentions where the class or the logging has occurred, and the green part would be this information that we have given. So it is much more better to see, and even the time difference, when it occurred and when the information has occurred, we'll be able to see that. So let's get into how to log this much more in a more best practice way. So this green you could think of as information instead of, so this one .log is for information purposes. There are different, similar to console.log, where there are different types of logging. There's as well for this class logger different kind of information. So let's go through that in our diagrams. So first of all, what's the concept of logging? So logging is a formal way of printing events that is happening in the system. So we are streaming that in our terminal in a much more refined or formal way. So we'll be able to see or debug, understand what is happening in our system, be it from the staging or in developing purposes or production purposes. Now there are different types of events that we can store, and they have different colors. So these are called log events, and actually I just mentioned as log events. It doesn't have to be called log events. I'm not sure what the name of it is itself, but yeah. So there are different types of loggings. So first, that's the first one that we have seen, the green one, right? It's called log. So for information, so information that has been occurred. So for example, a user has been created, post has been created, post has been deleted, and those kind of stuff. These are information, and it doesn't have to be that something has happened in a bad way or something occurred in our system. One is another way of logging where it doesn't crash the system, but we are giving a warning towards the person who is reading it that something might occur, or like just take a note of it that this happened in the system. So for example, the user has not logged in with their correct credentials, or another way of saying is like there is a memory leak happening in our system, but yeah, we would use warn instead of information. Now the error is something happened in your system, and that's how we know it's red. It's something happened in our system, and we should take care of it as soon as possible. When this happened, when you see red, that means something happened, so we have to take care of it, and this is how we are able to check the events. So we are going to check those three circumstances, and debug we won't do it in the videos, and it's actually only meant for when you are debugging. So basically, and a simple example would be when you are trying to debug something, right? But this logging won't be in the debug mode. So there is a debug mode for Nestjs. So basically, it will log only when you are in the debug mode. Other than that, it won't show in the terminal. And it's only purposefully for the developers to debug a certain case of scenario when something, for example, happened, an error or one. So let's start with information. So let's go to our user service. So let me remove this part. Yeah, and let's go to the user service. So in the user service, what we will do is when the user has been when there is a new user has been created, we are going to log. Instead of saying console.log new user, we will be using the logger. So again, I will showcase how we have done it in our controller. So first we will import our logger here. So we'll say logger, and next would be we are going towards the user service class, and in here we'll use something called private, and then we'll say logger, and in here we'll say new, so an instance, new instance of logger, and we'll be using, so in the parentheses it's asking for a context. So the context means what kind of class or what is happening in the information. So this logger, for example, is meant only for user service. So in itself you will be able to know what is happening, where the information has come through. So we'll use user service, and we'll use that user service, the name of the user service. So that every class has that in JavaScript, so you will be able to see the string as a string, the user's name, or you can make it as a string itself. So you could just put that, and instead of adding the name. But this one is like inconsistent, so I prefer using this one instead. So let's use that. And after we added our logger, so we will go towards the create user. In the create user, we will remove the console.log, and what we will do is this .logger, and we'll use info, actually log. So in here, that's the green part, so right, so we'll say a new user has been created, and we'll mention the user. So we'll specifically mention the specific user that has been created, and that will be new user, and that will be email. So that will be it for giving information that a new user has been created. So that's for log. So let's test it out. We'll use postman here to test this endpoint. And I hope that I have an endpoint for that. Yep. So I'll send the information. So localhost 3000 users, and the body will be email, and password will be this. So let's send it here, and we got it right. User service. The context will be user service, and the information a new user has been created, and the user is Khalid Subhan, Khalid at Gmail. So it works fine, really good. So we showcased how the log works. So the log, you give the information, and it will be a type of log, so it's just an information specifically. So now next would be warning. So in this case, what we'll do is if the user that has been asked for is not found, so we'll mention in get user. So in this one, we have warning result not found. So when there is not result, so we have to mention that, and we will use it as a warning. So just give a warning specifically. So what we'll do here, we'll use, instead of console.log, we'll use this .logger, and instead of using log, we'll use warn. So that's another type of function, and in here we'll mention user has not been found. It should be tilde sign, alright, and I'll mention ID, and the ID would be the number that has been tried to be searched. So this will be it. Now let's try it out. So what we will do is we will add our endpoint here. So we'll say, for example, 3, and we have here our warning notification, user has not been found. But if you mention, like for example 1, we will get the result. But in 3, since we don't have it in our array, so it doesn't exist here, so we're getting that user has not been found. Oh, I think I made a bug around here. So if not equals result, user find index equals to ID. Eh, I think I made a mistake somewhere around here. Okay, let me use that one. Alright. User has not been found. One. Okay, that's good. That's good. Alright. So now this is the warning sign. So if it has not been found, so it will give us this information. So next would be an error occurred. So what would be the error? Something went wrong, really wrong. So what would it be? So we have given the information of not found, the information of when the user has been created, and possibly in user's controller. I think in post service. Yeah, in post service. So in the post service, when you go to the post service, so find one. So if the user has not been found, we will throw an error that says post not found. So here we have to log the error. So instead of putting in the post service, what we'll do is we'll go to the post controller, and in the post.controller, so what we'll do is find one. So we'll use try catch here. So we'll use try catch, and let's remove this and put it here. So if any error occurs, we'll mention here throw error, and we'll use the error itself, message. But in here as well, what we'll do is we'll log the error as well. So what we'll do is we'll go to the post controller, and the post controller we will use our private logger, new logger, and we'll use post controller dot name. It will be it, and we will put the information in the catch. We'll say this dot logger dot error, and we'll mention, for example, we'll just use error dot message itself, because there's always a message for the error. So here's this dot logger error, and that will be it. Now let's try to use posts, and let's try to find a user, find one. So we'll use posts here, so we'll mention posts, and we'll, for example, ask for one and turn the server error. So we got post not found, so it doesn't exist, so it works fine. So we have post controller, exception handler. Okay, instead of exception handler, we will say, instead of throwing error, we'll say return error dot message to make it much more better. Alright, so now let's try to run it again. Yeah, there you go, post not found. So we have an error sign. So if it happens, it will show it here as an error, and the context would be post controller. So that will be it, and so that will be it, and we have done all the information that we are needed. So it's just for testing purposes. So we logged the information of when we have created a user, we have logged the information of when there is an error occurring or there is a warning occurring. And in the next video we are going to talk more about logging, but instead of putting it inside each of the functions, there should be a better way of logging the information whenever there is something occurring, and we will do that in the next section by using something called interceptors, which is similar concept to our validators of our classes. So the, where are they? Create user, yeah, those. So so we will use those concepts in our next video. And yeah, thank you very much. And oh yeah, before that, I forgot. I always tend to post this project in our GitHub repo. So this GitHub repo would be in this in this URL, and I always put it in the description in the video. So for each chapter I have put in a different branch. So chapter 2, for example, has the concept of whatever we have, 3, 4, 5, and the future would be 6 and 7 and 8. So in coming forth, I hope that whenever you have any problems regarding the code, you are able to see it through here. And yeah, thank you very much and have a good day.